So my name is Winston Clements. I guess my background on a personal level is someone who was born with a disability called Osteogenesis Imperfecta, which I'm sure nobody's going to remember, but it affects how my bones grow and how they develop. So all in all, I need to use a wheelchair for my mobility, and I am more susceptible to fractures and to breaking my bones. So that's kind of shaped a big part of who I am and how I show up in the world. And then I guess professionally, my background is in technology. I spent about, I think it was about 8, 9 years working for different big tech companies, and then eventually became interested in EEI within the tech world, and then fast forward, I now run my own DEI company and do keynote speaking for organizations and helping them to level up their thinking around diversity and inclusion.
So first of all, I just want to say your story can serve as the inspiration to so many families and so many children that are kind of coming up. I know a lot of families that first get a diagnosis for their child, or they're kind of in that stage of what is my child going to be like? What is their life journey going to be like? And you've achieved so much regardless of any conditions. Um, what can you speak to that a little bit more? Like, what was that like for you? Like, how have you achieved what you achieved? What what works for you in those areas?
Yeah, I think I can't take all the credit. I think a big part of it is I guess my support network. So when I was younger, I always say that I was born into the right family because it felt like they were perfectly equipped to handle in this case, me being the child with special needs. And, I got all the encouragement and I got all I got pushed as well. I was wrapped in cotton wool. There was a lot of expectations and, my parents and my sisters and, to be honest, everyone around me always expected big things from me. And I think I found that really motivating because it made me want to not play safe, but push myself out there. So whether it was at school and wanting to get involved in everything else that the other kids were doing, even though physically I was very, very different and I couldn't fully participate. Or whether it was later in the workplace, just believing in myself that I could work for a big, tech company and I could perform just as well as anybody else through that. And then I guess, yeah, now as a parent, because I got married 3 years ago and we have a 1 year old who is nearly two at the time of this recording.
Love it.
Yeah, so it's her birthday on Friday. So I guess this is like a new chapter that I'm having to learn how to push myself in that as well. And I guess nowadays my support network looks like, yeah, my wife and mentors that we have and other parents of young children who become our friends and just learning from them and taking the tips that I think will allow me to show up better.
I love that. I think some things that hit home for me specifically is having your support network, regardless of anything. I think in life, support networks are everything. I think another thing is mindset. I think it sounded like you had a very much of a I can do mindset, and it seems like the people that surrounded you had that same sort of a view. Um, I come across people that have alternative views, and it's like, well, what you believe you can achieve and what you believe that you can do is what you will be able to do. Um, can you speak a little bit more on your amazing 2 year old and how your life experiences have influenced how you raise your child?
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, we got married 3 years ago and we got pregnant about a year into marriage. So I think initially we had the idea of, yeah, we're gonna enjoy life and, do the travel thing for 5 years. But yeah, I guess it wasn't meant to be. And so when we had the baby, we're like, okay, now we need to be parents and embrace this amazing gift that we've been given. And I think for me, initially there was a mix of course, excitement and like really looking forward to becoming a father because that's something that I always dreamed of, even though I wasn't sure at some stages whether that would be possible for me. And so there was that side, but then there was also like a bit of anxiety, if I'm honest, because I'm looking at other fathers or, the representation of a father, from people that I knew, or even in society, or even just through watching TV. None of them really looked like me. And so I knew that there would be different things I would have to navigate in order to show up fully, as the best version of myself. And so, yeah, but it's been, and my wife has been amazing at this. It's been incredible, working together to figure out like the practicalities. So, we were speaking offline a short time ago, and I was explaining even something simple like picking up my daughter or putting her to bed or helping her with her feeding, would look completely different to me than it might for the average father. So I've enjoyed learning that side of things. And yeah, I'm at a stage where I now feel confident that, hey, even though there doesn't seem to be an obvious route for someone in my situation to do this thing as a father, there's always a way to adapt it, to get creative. My daughter, for example, she just loves, riding around on my wheelchair. So she'll sit on my lap and we'll kind of move around the house that way. So yeah, you realize that actually there's always a way to do stuff.
I love that. And I think what a note that kind of comes to me is you define your own normal. Like, and I think that's the thing regardless of any situation. Like you define what makes you happy. You define what your life is for you. You define what is normal for you and your family. And that is applicable to anyone in any situation, like whether you have a child that has autism or whether you are yourself autistic and raising a child or whatever it is, whether you have a visible or hidden disability, you define what makes normal for you. Um, I want to kind of go on to where can people find you and what areas are you based in?
Yeah, so I guess I'm quite visible online. So if you search my name, you probably find most of my social platforms. I am Winston Speaker on Instagram and also on TikTok. My wife and I also run a platform on YouTube together where we kind of do the behind the scenes and kind of show life as a couple where one of them has a disability and also trying to raise a family and run a business and all of these things. So you could find all of that on YouTube at the Clements. So definitely check it out. I also have a website which is winstonclements.com, and that's more for my speaking and how I work with companies.
Amazing. If you had kind of three notes of advice to leave, what would they be?
Yeah, honestly, I like how you summarized it, finding your own normal, because I think when, like I mentioned, I've had moments in my life where I've hesitated because I thought, okay, I don't see an example of someone doing this who looks like me. And so if you get attached to that idea that I have to do the thing in the normal way, then that can become quite anxiety inducing. And I think what's worked for me is to look at a situation and say, okay, I don't really see an example that looks like me, or I don't really have a clear idea of how this is going to happen, but I'm just going to go into it with an experimentation mindset. And we're going to try a bunch of things until we find the one that works. So that'll be the number one thing that I'd leave either for parents, you know, with children with special needs, or yeah, just to be honest, I think it's applicable for most people, finding your normal through experimentation.
I love that. I love it. I love it. And again, I think you're such an inspiration. I think your story and the things that you've achieved and all the amazing things that you've done can inspire so many people. Um, and I love that. Thank you for having this conversation.
No, thank you for the invitation.